everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a bridge to a better life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, and with me is Dr. Anahy Fonseca. It is so good to have you join us in this conversation, Anahy. For those who have not met or even heard of Anahy, and she's been with us alongside this past years of conversations, right, Anahy? But for those who, for whatever reason, have not heard her before in our program, Dr. Anahy is a psychiatrist, member of the Psychiatric Association of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, where she's also a coordinator and a founding member of its Department of Psychiatry and Spirituality. She is a member of Brazilian Psychiatric Association and of the section of religiosity, spirituality, and psychiatry of the World Psychiatry Association. Dr. Nayi is a young Jungian, my apologies, a Jungian analyst and supervisor, and she's also the coordinator of the Department of Analytical Psychology and Spirituality of the Jungian Association of Brazil. Dr. Fonseca is a member of the Spiritist Medical Association of Rio Grande do Sul and of the Spiritist Medical Association in Brazil, where she teaches Spiritist psychology of Joanna de Angelis. So she is vitally important in this program, and I'm so thankful. Thank you so much, Anahy, for leading this conversation. And today we're going to talk about this current state, right? Our world is somehow suffering, it's crying, it is sick. And this is a very interesting conversation because if we think about our timeline, we have survived a world pandemic, but most of us, if you think about, believe we are sick as an organization, as a world, as a society. And from that perspective, we will talk a little bit about crises, right? And the dictionary definition of crisis is a time with intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. And in fact, and we're going to talk about it later, right? The word crisis is derived from Sanskrit, but the Greek origin of crisis can be interpreted as a change or a conflict that takes place at any stage of our life. And for whatever reason, has not been resolved or overcome. And I think this is what's the what we want to talk about, right? We're in crisis because we have not yet overcome this period. And I just want to say to all of you who are here watching this program today with me, thank you so much for being here. And if this is your first time watching the podcast-like program, please note that this program, Psychology and Spirituality Weekly Talks, are based on the works of Joanna de Angelis, and we are here because we want to create, to offer all of us this safe space to confront, compare, correlate, and expand spirituality concepts from a psychological lens. Today's program, sponsored by TV Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. And make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you have any questions, feedback, critique, anything, write in the chat window and we will try to address them, if not now, at a later time. But Anahy, before we start a conversation, I am eager for you to share with our audience today what's on top of your mind lately. I know that Anahy is the behind the scene mastermind of a week long, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a week long event that will take place in August of this year in a special location of Brazil. It is the city is called Canela. It is just the most beautiful place, and it's right there, Rio Grande do Sul, which is borders with Argentina, so the very bottom of Brazil, geographically speaking. And I believe the title was Jung, Culture and Spirituality in Brazil, right? Searching for the spirit of the depth in modern time. Anahy, can you talk a little bit about it, where we are, where we can find more information before we start talking about the sick world and the crisis in earnest?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. And like a Freudian slip, we said, I would love to be young, besides being Jungian or younger.
Yes, me too. Me too.
Yeah. And since we all have the inner child, okay, that it's okay, one of our complexes, but also in the core of the inner child complex, there is the archetype of the child, and we say the divine child. So this all this creativity and the imagination and mystery and enchantment that the child brings to life, discovering life, being humble that we don't know everything, that the world has its magic. And I think that's what Jesus wanted to tell us, that we should be like children to go into this new kingdom that he was talking about, right? The divine kingdom, that we should express it. And we have been talking a lot in our podcast, the spiritual realms, the divine realms that he came to teach us uh, how to achieve it. And so the crisis, and also what it's in my mind with, and Joanna is responsible for a lot of what's in my mind these days, because she puts together all psychology that we study, and also all the spiritist knowledge, and she opens new paths for understanding the spirit of the depths that it's in the title of Jung in Brazil.
Can you say that again? The title of the program?
Yes, we call the search for the spirit of the depths. So this spirit of the depths, it's like, we have been talking like the self, for instance, that Joanna says that the Jung self is our spirit. So that has we know that for us here in this experience in this life, we are discovering ourselves. It's a process of self-discovery, right? And discovering our soul potentials as co-creators of our reality. So it's so important, Marsha, and everybody that it's watching us and listening to this podcast, for us to reconnect with our inner world. And Joanna calls us to do this inner journey
Mm-hmm.
of self discovery. Why? Because all our potentials, all our, the our soul's development, let's say, our consciousness, the evolution of our consciousness, either individual but also collectively. We are going to be talking about that today. So our evolution and the evolution of the world itself, the world that we live in, because we are a humanity that is living among other sentient beings, beings
Yeah.
that are able to feel and to sense and are also evolving. So we are evolving as brothers and sisters in this humanity and in this earth of ours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gaia, we call Gaia, with all the sentient beings. So it's a beautiful process of evolution of consciousness. And we are actually, privileged to be here and to already have this consciousness that in this book that our talk is today is based, that it's finding peace and health, right? her book, she talks about this evolution of consciousness from instinct as, very young, like animals that we were once, but also so from instincts to until to reach a certain point of rationality, but not being stuck in this point, so that we can grow to what we call, what she calls actually, and a lot of other mentors and spiritual guides are calling cosmic consciousness. And it's so beautiful. So we thought about, I have been working with Professor Lionel Corbett, that it's one of the main Jungian authors that talk about spirituality in Jung's work, and religiosity in Jung's work. And so he says that the world is nowadays disenchanted. You talked about the pandemic, right? So in the pandemic, people, of course, we were all afraid
Yeah.
of dying. Our egos, not our selves, our higher consciousness, because our higher consciousness knows that we never die. We die only in the material body, but it's part of life, of our eternal life of evolution, our evolution. But in the ego, we were very afraid. So, of course, we would turn to our technology, the vaccines, and our science, the
Yes.
development. Of course, it is the
And as a, by the way, just sorry to interrupt your thought process, but I think it's important for us to understand, despite the crisis that came with the pandemic, like you said, there was this outburst of technological advance because of the urgency that changed. I work in the healthcare field here in the U.S., and I understand, for example, in North America, the U.S. specifically, U.S. and Food Administration, right? The FDA has a responsibility to ensuring safety, etc. And but because of it, it was just this long life cycle to create anything new, including vaccines. And the pandemic just changed, uprooted the entire process. It was possible, as we now know now, 1 year to get from start to finish the process of finding the or healing or minimizing the impacts of COVID. But back to you. Sorry for that, but I just thought it was very interesting for us to know technological advances in many areas, including healthcare, came because of this crisis, right, Anahy?
yes, exactly. So, but so science,
Yeah.
technology, and what we say a mechanistic approach to life
Mm-hmm.
has been growing on, and I think the pandemic just, as you said, accelerated the process, right?
Uh-huh.
But it's a paradox, because at the same time, and because of the fear is in the instinct of fear, of fighting and running. It's in the basis of the brain. It's very primitive in all of us. Talking,
Is it correct called the reptilian brain,
yes,
Anahy?
yeah,
Okay.
a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us call the reptilian brain. But so because of this, it's a paradox. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because of this, we for a while we thought of, we have to need to have something that will save us. And this is a very primitive way of thinking,
Yeah.
because what is salvation?
Yeah.
And when I think about, I cannot, for instance, forget philosophy that brought us to this point also, and
Uh-huh.
also spirituality, and really, these are all forces together with science and rational thinking, are forces, potentialities of our souls, of our psyche. But if I get unilateral, if I only think of one, from one point of view, then I'm going to be missing a lot of what it's forces within my soul, within my psyche, within my mind, that are really very important for, the whole of my personality, of my psyche. So what we say, Professor Lionel Corbett and I, in our talks and studies, and a lot of other Jungian analysts, for instance, that always is a very, if you can get a very unbalanced and not healthy. We are talking about crisis,
Hmm.
mentally healthy,
Yeah.
okay, not mentally healthy. If you get only one point of view, and if you use only one of your potentials, of your mind, of your forces, inner strengths, let's say, okay, and potentialities of the psyche, of the mind. So it's kind of dangerous. And one of the things that we get unbalanced, and we
Hmm.
are seeing this in our crisis, that could have, for instance, the pandemic and everything that we have learned about. We had this precious time to think, to be in our homes with our families. And what happened? Did we get more balanced? And, did we meditate more? Did
Yes.
we develop our spirituality? Well, a lot of people did,
Yes.
but actually, a lot of people didn't. And what we saw is that a lot of people got unbalanced. I think it's one of the things because this activation of the reptilian brain, as you said,
Hmm.
the fear and this basic instincts. And then technology started being like, for many people, like this salvation.
Yes.
And,
Interesting. Yeah.
science. And for instance, okay, we medical doctors, I do research, so we are kind of scientists, psychiatrists and all that. We are scientists. But I study, for instance, the anomalous spiritual experiences. We are going to be talking this in Jung Brazil, about this also in Jung in Brazil. We are going to have researchers in this field. You and Josad are going to be there too, and we are going to be talk also about spiritist knowledge and Joanna de Angelis. We are going to be, so we are covering a lot of ground, searching for this balance that
Hmm.
can only be achieved if we search for the spirit of the death, as we were talking about.
Hmm.
If we try to reach uh, really what is important and precious within our soul, our inner knowledge, wisdom, that it's not only, of course, due to the ego. The
Hmm.
ego is the consciousness, the center of our personality and our conscious mind that is dealing with this world. But for instance, the ego is totally subject to materialistic thinking, because it's dealing with the material life, with this three-dimensional
Yeah.
space and time that we are in. But this is the ego. So according to Joanna and to a lot of Jungian thinkers, as myself and Professor Lionel Corbett, there is this self, our higher self, our spirit, that the ego is in contact, even if the ego doesn't want to be in contact sometimes. I
Yeah.
want to pay attention to this life. I want to, to study science and technology because this saved us. And but the problem is that the self talks to the ego through intuitions, synchronicities, dreams, right? And it's calling all the time, because the self, Jung self, and is the part of the psyche, let's say, that is connected to the transpersonal dimension of the psyche, to the what Jung called the collective unconscious. And see, Marcia, we were talking in the beginning that we are in a crisis. We are
Yes.
developing more consciousness, because we know that crises bring, they put, let's say, things in opposition to one another.
Yeah.
And so, of course, for instance, um, let's say the pandemic was a global crisis, right? But
Yeah.
also we were as individuals suffering this crisis. So of course, let's talk about the ego. So the ego was suffering with the fear of death, with grieving for people that left. Okay.
And many of us here, including in this podcast discussion here, I'm sure either knows of someone or have suffered or was impacted by someone who suffered through COVID. And so this is a very real issue here, right, Anahy? This one specific crisis. This is not the only one, but this relatively recent crisis for that we all went through.
Yeah, and you say when you talked about, so we were all mourning in a sense and
Yeah.
afraid.
Yes.
So
Yes.
when you talked about, Joanna de Angelis talks about crisis, and she remembers that it comes from the Sanskrit,
Yes.
kri or kur, right? And the meaning is to release in Sanskrit, to purify. So what were we releasing in this crisis? What were we purifying within ourselves?
I love that just right there. What are we doing? Why? And if we see that, it changes everything, right? And when we really look at the origin of the words, in this case, the Sanskrit origin, it really shifts dramatically on how we must stop to maybe reevaluate where we are, what we're doing, the pains, right? The pains that we're going through and why, what is behind that suffering, and so on and so forth. But go on. You're saying that the Sanskrit word is about releasing, right?
Purifying.
Yes.
See how beautiful. So one of the things, Marcia, and everybody else, is that of course we were in opposition. The ego was very opposed, because if it was worried with dying and mourning, people that left and all of this. So of course we were, it was opposing the inner force and the struggle that the self was trying, the calling, let's say, of the inner voice, of this deep, the spirit of these depths, okay, our own depths,
Yeah.
uh, that it was calling us to release this wisdom,
Yes.
of course it would diminish our fear, and also our mourning for the ones that went ahead of us.
Yeah.
When we remember that we are eternal, and that we are here just to learn and to go back to
Yes.
whatever people think they are going back to, but to go back enriched and, let's say, with more wisdom, with our hearts, with more faith, for instance, with more connection to the creation, to God. And this is so important. John is always reminding us that we are supposed to go towards cosmic evolution,
Yes.
right? So it's so important. So I know that a lot of people have had an awakening, a spiritual awakening with the pandemic.
Can I
Okay.
say something that is just came to my mind, and it's quite silly, but I'm an avid lover of documentaries about nature. And in your neck of the woods, right in the south of Brazil, relatively close to Patagonia, there was this documentary about Patagonia, how it's booming that ecosystem is being protected, and all the animals are just thriving. And the one population that is thriving, I believe, is the puma, a cat, right? Wild cat, large wild cat. And so the documentary is about what they can do, the larger competition that is coming from other pumas because they're thriving now. So territories are limited, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that you're talking here in back to human evolution and how our evolving mind. It's this how we went from that early reptilian brain into a mammalian, right? Brain into where we are now. uh, Fear is the key point. How we go back, no matter what, right? No matter how evolved we are becoming, fear still very, very strongly connecting all of us. So the image that came to me, you're gonna laugh, and but it was of the mother puma, and she has all her cubs, and she has to get out to hunt, then call them to go to her so they can feed. So it's very threatening. And in this documentary specifically, they talked about this one male in the group of female that was quite adventurous, and one female that was quite shy. And a lot of the discussions there is the as they grow, how to tap into I'm too forward versus I'm too timid in terms of survival. If you're too timid, you never learn how to hunt. If you're too aggressive, before you're ready, you will be hunted and killed. And it's very interesting that you see that fine balance that maybe when you're talking about the evolution of us human beings, no longer pumas, but human beings here, there's a point where we must have front and center to our thinking to to manage the fear so that we did not do things ahead of time, but it is now time to become adults and to forward to take responsibility to nourish ourselves. And I'm talking about more in the psychological perspective, in the spiritual perspective, right? Let's nourish us, let's be strong, let's go out instead of being timid and paralyzed by fear. I just thought it was funny too that you're talking. This memory, this visual image came very strong to me, and I.
Well, I think it's a great example, a very simple but very, very profound, very deep example. For instance, Martha, of what happens in this transpersonal dimension of the psyche
Mhm.
as the collective unconscious, as Jung says, and the way that we evolve together. That's why it's so important for to have these talks, to have people talking to each other again as we used to do. Sit by the fire. It can be your fireplace, doesn't have to be outside our homes anymore. But sit by the fire with everybody, teenagers, grandpas, grandmas, children, and talk about these things,
Mhm.
because I remember now when you were talking about this, the pumas, the very shine, very the other one that was very
It's very
brave.
aggressive. Yeah, yeah, very brave. Yeah.
How do we balance these forces within ourselves? Because sometimes we have a very shy puma at the same time as a very aggressive part of us, right? And which one predominates? How do
Yeah.
we balance these forces? And so we are learning individually, with this inner conversation, let's say, when the ego calms down and starts really paying attention to dreams, to synchronicities, meaningful coincidences, or coincidences connected by meaning, we could say, in the world. that show us that our inner world and the outer world are related in a
Yes.
meaningful way, and also insights and intuitions. And I think it's a beautiful image that you brought with the puma and this, and you said they were, thriving and all
Yes.
of this, because I think we are undergoing as humanity the same process, only in a higher step because of our rational mind and our also the development of our spirituality. I'm quite sure, as Joanna tells us, that it's the path towards cosmic evolution, as just the all the understanding all this connection. But it reminded me that Jung's project of psychology, Jung, it was very focused on the Platonic idea of the word soul,
Mm-hmm.
that it's called in Latin anima mundi. Anima, it's soul, and mundi is the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was also a cosmic concept, the cosmic world Plato was talking about. And in the concept is that it's that the universe is one whole of wholes, he says,
Yeah.
right? And he sees, think of the world as a single living creature. Look how beautiful,
It
that
is.
contains all living creatures within it, us included, right?
Yeah.
Humanity included. So the world soul would be the soul of the cosmos. We are cosmic beings because we are created with the same elements of the cosmos. This is beautiful if you think. So we are not a part of the cosmos, apart. We are part of the cosmos, right? And he described it, all of this, the world, the soul of the world soul, as the intelligent and harmonious principle of proportion or relatedness that exists at the heart of the cosmic pattern and allows the living world to unfold in the best possible way. I think your puma is an example. You are very inspired. Was an example of Plato's Anima Mundi. That it seems, oh, I have never read about Plato, but people can put in the Wikipedia Plato and Anima Mundi and learn a little more. But your puma, it's perfect. The example, because it's the way that if we understand that everything is connected,
Yeah.
everything and everyone. So we understand that each step of the way that we develop more consciousness about ourselves, and so about our inner world and the outer world, we are evolving together. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes. Yes.
In spiritually speaking, it's not the survival of the strongest. There's
Yes.
not, spiritually speaking, we are all evolving together. So everything that I learn, oh, this is because I'm a young analyst. I'm young analyst.
A young Jungian analyst.
I used to be. I used to be in my mind. I am. Right? And so if I really understand, I really try to understand, read Joanna and think about all these issues and all this stuff, and well, of course, then prejudice, selfishness,
Yes.
everything that is bringing crisis to our world. Joanna says about this crisis of values,
Yeah.
because people then connect only to materialistic things and forget that, basically that's what Joanna is saying, that forget that it's not about of what we have in this world. What we have is just things for us to learn here, practical things and possibilities.
It's the
But we
tools, right? We're here
tools,
because
right?
the world provide tools through, uh, e- e- and I'm thinking the word would be existential, but it's not it. But it's in living, experiencing through a material lens, a material area. We then become acquire wisdom. You mentioned this already. One of the things that I was thinking just now, as you said, and you're referring to Joanna de Angelis in this book that you we mentioned, and it's in the description of today's discussion, by the way, as a reference for everyone. But in that we talk about the fact that we are in crisis, right? And it's a crisis of value, but there's a crisis of just the world is falling apart. The nature it feels like in many instances nature is just crying, but not just crying, it's reacting toward aggressively toward humanity right back. It's a tsunami here, it is floods there, it is fire somewhere else, and so all of those crises is really very much like your body getting sick perhaps, and you're coughing a lot so that you can change what you eat, how you breathe, etc. I This is very simplistic, but it's really more of a symptom of this urgent and important need for us to lift or shift to a different paradigm, to which we're no longer that man perhaps with a reptilian brain, right, or even a rational brain, and now we're pushed to become this new person with a new brain, with a new paradigm on how we live. But if we think about it, and you mentioned Mother Earth, Gaia, right? My goodness, think about, Anahy, how only 200 years ago, 250, right? 250 years ago, at the dawn of industrial civilization, the industrial revolution, where we started to do this and create that, but the residue, the spoils, the waste from those activities would just poof goes into the ocean, into the rivers, right? And if we have to use fossil fuels and to get the engine going, the air now polluted goes into the air because we had no feeling that we're soiling, and I'm using a very you know charged word here, but we're creating all this waste into the world. We're not being responsible or even accountable. Our How can I be accountable to my next generation? And the generation after that, if I do this, I continue to do this. So it is this moment that nature says, stop. We are at a critical point in this sick world that we need to get up and stop. But it's not just carbon emissions, is it, Anaí? It is not about, oh, now we have a program to recycle. Those are too narrow. It is really all about changing how we go about living our lives from a very individualistic, competitive, afraid, right, Anaí? This living all those phobias and fears, to change to this new world. Can you tell us about what is this new world? What are the shifts in our behaviors and thinking, Anaí? Maybe you can have an example of how we can think about it.
Okay. Well, when you were talking, Marta, it came to me three principles that are so important for these days that we are to solve this crisis that we are in.
Mhm.
One of them, it's of course the spiritist knowledge brings to us the concept of reincarnation. that I know a lot of people have a different, time trying to understand or even to accept. But it's so rational if you're going to think of, because one life, it's too little a time to
Mm-hmm.
learn everything that we needed to learn to achieve a spiritual evolution, of course,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, of course, we're going to come back to school. We go back to school every day, right? We cannot learn everything in one day. And
Yeah.
if we think that all religions talk about the soul as eternal part of ourselves, so of course, if we are eternal, we couldn't learn everything that we must learn
Yeah.
in one day. Let's say that one life is one day in our evolution, let's say.
Yeah.
So it would be impossible. So the concept of reincarnation has to be more studied and more that people should understand more. And this we have all the beautiful knowledge of spiritism that brings to us, and also other types of religions from the Eastern religions
Yeah.
and things like that bring. So people have a lot of material to study that. And also something that pandemic, and you were talking in the beginning about the way that science and scientists got together to develop the vaccines. So what was that? Cooperation.
Yes.
It
Yes.
was not, competition.
Well,
If
and it's funny because sorry, because I just wanted to let us know it's the new paradigm is true collaboration, cooperation. But the fact, if you remember, there was a race, right? Is it Moderna? Is it Pfizer? Is it the laboratory in China, in Russia, in Brazil, so on and so forth? So we don't just become cooperative like
no,
this. We are pushed to extremes of um, complete annihilation of our world from a humanity perspective. We were at the brink, right? To push us to really look together. And then what I saw was the collaboration or cooperation with organs and countries, right? Countries, leadership in different countries to have access, but also not just have a stockpile of vaccines for one country. It was really disseminated globally because this was, as far as I'm concerned, the first truly global pandemic.
yeah, yeah. So that was, I think, the beginning
Hmm.
of our learning to cooperate globally.
Yeah, yeah,
That was the beginning, because there was a lot of course, ambitions, and
yeah,
a lot of people wanting to get money from, of course, other people's suffering and all that.
yeah,
We know that this darkness, this shadow, it's a collective shadow, and we cannot be naive. It's still pretty much active,
yeah.
okay? But with the pandemic, we had this push, let's say, with
Yeah.
the beginning of learning to cooperate.
So the first item you said was reincarnation. The
Reincarnation,
second was
cooperation,
cooperation. What was the third?
and not competition. And the third, I would say,
Yeah.
it's and I heard this. It's I'm not creating. We never create anything. We are, we have our intuitions, and we have our guides and mentors saying, we have other people talking about. But we say a lot of this in the depth psychology, Jung psychology. But I heard somebody saying that it's as a spiritual principle, because we say that it's a psychological principle, that it's all about discernment. So
Yes.
discernment as a spiritual principle, not judgment, because we
Yeah.
know in the Gospels, don't judge, because we are
Yeah.
going to be judged by your own consciousness in the same
Yeah.
way that you judge other people's. And we know through Joanna and the depth psychology that this uh, Jesus was telling us this because, of course, he knew everything, and he was so evolved. And you know that when we are judging, we are projecting
Yes.
inner stuff onto others. Of course, we don't know exactly the others. We don't know even ourselves really
Correct.
what we are trying.
And my understanding, Anahy, is that because when we talk about overcoming judgment, we are also in that just that one phrase, one sentence, we're really talking about um, somehow eradicating prejudices, right? And
Yeah,
prejudices are nothing more, nothing less of those uh, uh, putting into boxes what I don't identify for myself, the other. So the other may be a woman, right? And we still see in many different geographies and different cultures the woman as a second class citizen, right? But then there are racial prejudices, there are sexual, gender, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So many prejudices we bring with us. But I love what you said, those are just an inkling to our projections. It's inside of us, and we're projecting because there is this external validation of certain elements of illusory as they are of power, right? In an example, I'm going to give an example that I'm not, but maybe if I am very tall, and there's research that talks about if I'm very tall and I'm very slender but muscular, healthy, if I have a deep voice, if I speak grammatically really well, all of those traits that are just external traits of who you are as a human being usually drives a better success in our society today, professionally speaking, than otherwise. So, in so many words, we live still with those ideas or idealized ways of thinking that this is the most powerful person versus that, but it's not, right? We know reincarnation and the idea of the immortality of the soul and the evolving nature of our entire collective self through this new way that is about to happen completely. We should be welcoming all of us with equanimity and not prejudice in this case.
yes, Marcia, because prejudice are belongs to the ego part
Yes.
of our psyche
Yeah.
and our complexes, what is repressed in the unconscious.
Hmm.
So that's why Joanna talks about us self-discovery and understanding about ourselves and reaching that point of really talking with the inner voice, with the self, because in the self there is no prejudice, because the self is connected to the spiritual realms.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the
And
sense of unity, right? That we're
yeah,
all part of this one
yes,
world. Yeah.
the Anima
Mhm.
Mundi,
Yeah.
Plato's Anima
Yeah.
Mundi. So there would be no point. So I'm never a part of anyone. It doesn't matter in this life of that we are living if I am this or that culture, gender, whatever,
Hmm.
because deep inside of us, okay, we belong together in a sense that we are all learning, we are all really part interrelated and part of a unity.
Yeah.
So it's totally silly, sorry, in
Yeah.
talking
Uh,
about prejudice if we are talking from the self point of view, our higher self. And that's the point to try to go, to reach another step in our evolution
mhm.
when we are closer to this cosmic understanding of life, of this cosmic
Absolutely.
consciousness.
Yeah.
We need to, develop this talk of the ego with the self. But I wanted to finish. Okay, I know we are in the end.
Yes,
We have
yes.
so much to talk about. Maybe
We
we are
will
going to
talk
start.
some more. Yeah, we'll talk some more about this because it's very dense concepts that I think would like to break it apart further.
Yeah, so I wanted just to finish for today at least, bringing a sentence by Joanna de Angelis that's so beautiful. That she says, it's the end in the end of chapter one of this book that we are talking about. In a poetic image, the self, that she says, Jung self is our spirit, so the self emerges from the darkness towards light, like a diamond that frees itself from the gross envelope in which it hides, to reflect, after being polished, the brightness of the stars. I think
Yes.
it's so beautiful because we are polishing our own personal diamond with all this crisis.
Yeah.
As long as we don't get stuck in our egos and our, if we understand more about ourselves. And Jung in Brazil are going to be all about that because, to finish with the start, as a good Jungian, right? Because in Brazil, Brazil is known as a country that has a lot of religious syncretism, and we call everybody is interested, the divine child, in a sense that,
Yes.
wow, I want to learn about this and that and that. So Brazil has a lot of religious syncretism and a cultural diversity, and also a high percentage, I study and research this, of spiritual or what we call anomalous experiences in the general population. And also famous mediums as Francisco Cândido Xavier, and our dear Divaldo Pereira Franco, that it's psychographed all of Joanna's books. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and we are going to talk more about that. And you have talked about Jung in Brazil, but we are going to launch by the end of January this month, and it's going to be in Facebook and Instagram, so people can look for Jung in Brazil, and we are going to be there with all
And
the
do you
information.
have a website name already, Anahy?
Uh, I'm not going to give today the
Okay. Okay.
website, the address, because
Yeah.
we are in the end, we're finishing it.
Yeah. So
But
it's under
people can look
construction.
in
Yeah.
Instagram and
Yeah.
Facebook, Jung in Brazil, and then the
Yeah.
link for the website is going to be there.
So before we close, I just say you're all invited for this amazing event that will be focusing on um, Jungian psychology, but really exploring the sacred, the spiritual elements of Jung and his scientific approach to psychology, right? And the fact that is in English, that is in Brazil, and that is in a beautiful place, I think it is just a huge opportunity not to be missed. But with that, Anahy, we'll continue our discussion about a sick world and all the crises that are there. There's more to come, and I appreciate you being here with me today. Bye, everyone. See you next time.
Bye bye.